There is a quiet town in southern Japan where something strange happens every morning. Before the sun fully clears the rooftops, elderly men and women, many of them well past 80, are already moving. Not exercising in the way most of us picture it. No gym bags, no fitness trackers, no music in their ears. Just slow, deliberate motion, repeated the same way it has been repeated for decades. And when researchers finally sat down to study why this region produces so many people who remain steady on their feet, sharp in conversation, and independent well into their 10th decade of life, they didn't find a secret diet. They didn't find rare genetics. What they found was something almost embarrassingly simple. And that simplicity is exactly why most of the Western world has overlooked it for so long. Here is the question worth sitting with for a moment. If muscle loss, stiffness, and slower thinking were purely the result of getting older, age alone, then everyone on Earth would decline at roughly the same rate. But that isn't what happens. Some people at 70 move like people at 50. Others at 50 already move like people at 70. The difference isn't just genetics or luck. A growing body of research in movement science and gerontology points to something more specific, more actionable, and frankly more hopeful. The way a body is used daily, not occasionally, not in scheduled hour-long sessions, but daily and habitually, appears to shape how that body ages far more than most people realize. This is where the story gets interesting, because the movements we're about to walk through aren't found in fitness programs sold online. They aren't branded, they aren't trademarked, and none of them require special equipment. They are woven so deeply into ordinary Japanese daily life that many elders who practice them wouldn't even describe themselves as exercising. They'd simply call it living. And that distinction between exercise as a task and movement as a lifestyle may be one of the most overlooked ideas in modern healthy aging. Let's start with something almost everyone gets wrong about walking. Most health advice pushes people toward walking faster, walking further, hitting a step count. But there is a slower, quieter form of walking that shows up again and again in observations of long-living populations, a pace so unhurried it almost feels like it shouldn't count as exercise at all. Some researchers call it mindful walking. The idea is not to burn calories quickly, but to let each foot fully articulate through the ground, heel first, rolling through the arch, finishing at the toes, while breathing is paced deliberately alongside the steps. It sounds almost too gentle to matter. But your feet contain dozens of small joints and thousands of nerve endings. Every one of them sends signals upward to the brain about balance, positioning, and stability. When we rush, we skip over most of that sensory information. When we slow down, the nervous system gets the chance to actually process it. Over time, this kind of unhurried, sensation-rich walking is associated with better balance control and calmer cardiovascular responses, the kind of quiet physiological shift that doesn't show up overnight but compounds across years. If you've ever noticed that a short, relaxed walk leaves you feeling clearer-headed than a rushed one, you've already felt a hint of why this matters. Now picture something most adults haven't done since childhood, resting in a full, deep squat, heels flat on the ground, spine long, simply existing in that position for a few minutes while doing something else entirely, reading, chatting, tending a garden. In many parts of Japan, this isn't a stretch reserved for warm-ups. It's a resting posture, used the way a Western adult might use a chair. And that difference in daily habit turns out to carry real biomechanical weight. Sitting in chairs for most of the day, which is the default for the majority of adults in industrialized countries, keeps the hips in a narrow, shortened range of motion for hours at a stretch. The deep squat does the opposite. It opens the hip joint through nearly its full natural range, engages the muscles that support the pelvic floor, and gently decompresses the lower spine. Physical therapists who work with older adults often point to hip mobility, not raw leg strength alone, as one of the clearest predictors of whether someone can rise from a low chair, get off the floor, or catch themselves during a stumble. The uncomfortable truth is that many people don't lose the ability to squat because of age. They lose it because they stop practicing the position for years at a time, and the body quite efficiently adapts to what it's asked to do, and just as efficiently forgets what it isn't. There's a second layer to this story, one that goes beyond joints and muscles into something more surprising: balance and brain health being far more connected than most people assume. Consider test. Stand near a wall for safety and try lifting one foot slightly off the floor for even 30 seconds. For a lot of adults over 50, this is harder than expected, and that difficulty isn't only about leg strength. Standing on one leg requires the brain to process input from the inner ear, the eyes, and pressure sensors in the feet simultaneously, then make dozens of tiny corrective adjustments every second without you consciously noticing any of it. Some longevity researchers have gone as far as suggesting that single-leg balance ability with future health outcomes as strongly as more traditional markers like blood pressure, because it reflects how well multiple body systems are still communicating with each other in real time. This is part of why simple balance practice, done consistently, is quietly recommended by physical therapists as one of the most efficient fall prevention tools available, more efficient in some ways than generalized strength training alone, because it trains the coordination between systems, not just the systems individually. Then there's a movement most people perform without a second thought until one day they can't, getting down onto the floor and back up again without using their hands or furniture for support. It seems almost too basic to study, and yet it has become a genuine focus of aging research, because how easily a person transitions between standing and sitting on the floor turns out to be a remarkably honest snapshot over overall functional fitness, encompassing leg strength, core stability, joint flexibility, and motor planning all at once. In cultures where floor sitting is part of daily life, meals eaten cross-legged, tea shared at low tables, this transition happens dozens of times a day without anyone thinking of it as training. In cultures built almost entirely around chairs, the movement can quietly disappear from someone's repertoire by their 60s, not because the body suddenly forgot how, but because it was never asked to remember. The encouraging part of this finding is that the ability to sit and rise from the floor isn't fixed. It responds to practice, even in people who haven't done it in years, which means this particular marker of aging is, to a real extent, something people can actively rebuild. Morning ritual matters here too, and Japan offers a striking cultural example. Since the late 1920s, structured sequence of gentle stretches has been broadcast each morning across the country, practiced by children before school and by retirees in parks. A shared few minutes of synchronized movement that asks nothing more than a few square feet of space and bare feet on the floor. What makes this kind of ritual meaningful isn't intensity, it's consistency and timing. Joints rely on a natural lubricant called synovial fluid to move smoothly, and that fluid circulates most effectively through gentle, repeated motion, especially after the stillness of a night's sleep. A few minutes of unhurried stretching shortly after waking gives joints the chance to move through their full range before the demands of the day begin, which may be part of why populations with this kind of daily ritual report noticeably less stiffness and better shoulder and hip mobility, even into advanced age. There's also a psychological dimension worth naming honestly. Starting the day with a small, achievable ritual, one that asks for a few minutes rather than a full workout, tends to build the kind of consistency that more demanding routines often fail to sustain, because the barrier to doing it is almost non-existent. The final piece of this pattern involves the torso and something researchers refer to as anti-rotational strength, the ability of the core and spine to resist and control twisting forces rather than simply bending forward and back. A simple version of this, using nothing more than a folded towel held at shoulder height and gently twisted from side to side against light resistance, activates stabilizing muscles along the spine that rarely get engaged during typical daily movement. These are the same muscles that quietly protect the lower back during everyday actions like reaching into a car, turning to grab something off a shelf, or catching your balance on an uneven sidewalk. Some neuroscience research also suggests that controlled rhythmic movements involving both sides of the body in coordination may engage both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously, which has led some researchers to explore connections between this type of cross-body movement and measures of coordination and reaction time in older adults. It's a compelling area of study, still developing, but it points toward the same underlying theme running through everything here. The body and brain are not separate systems aging on independent timelines. They are deeply, continuously in conversation with each other. What ties all of this together isn't any single movement being a hidden miracle cure, because no single movement is. It's the underlying philosophy, one that treats movement not as a scheduled task to check off a list, but as something woven into the actual architecture of daily life. Western fitness culture often frames exercise as separate from living, something you carve out 45 minutes for, then set aside. But a body that moves in small, varied, unhurried ways throughout the entire day, walking mindfully, resting in a squat instead of a chair, balancing while brushing teeth, transitioning to the floor, back without a second thought, receives a completely different kind of signal than a body that sits for 10 hours and then does one intense workout. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but the research on longevity populations increasingly suggests that frequency and consistency across a normal day may matter just as much, if not more, than isolated bursts of intensity. It's worth being honest here too. Movement alone doesn't explain everything about why some populations age with more independence than others. Diet, social connection, healthcare access, and genetics all play meaningful roles, and no single practice, however elegant, replaces medical guidance tailored to an individual's actual health history. If you're managing joint pain, a past injury, or any specific medical condition, these kinds of movements are worth discussing with a doctor or physical therapist before making them a regular habit, not because they're risky in general, but because every body carries its own particular story. What the research does suggest, cautiously and without over-promising, is that the way a body is used in the small, unremarkable moments of an ordinary day, not just in designated exercise time, appears to play a meaningful role in how gracefully that body continues to serve someone decades down the line. So here's a different way to think about aging than the one most grew up with. Maybe the goal was never to fight the clock or chase some finish line of eternal youth. Maybe it was always something quieter than that, staying capable of doing the small things that make an ordinary life feel like your own, bending down to tie a shoe without thinking twice, standing to greet someone without hesitation, walking to the end of the street simply because you feel like it. The elders who move this way every day aren't performing longevity for anyone. They're just living, one unhurried, deliberate motion at a time, and in doing so, they've stumbled onto something that modern science is only now beginning to fully understand: that how you move through an ordinary Tuesday might matter more to your future than any single thing do in a gym. The question isn't whether you have time to add another routine to your life. The question is whether the next 20 years of your movement will happen to you, or whether you'll start shaping them, one small intentional motion at a time, starting today.